Welcome to this special edition of the StoreCast Self-Storage Industry Interview Series for the Self-Storage Association Asia Expo. We're delighted to join and interview and introduce some guests from the market down under. Plenty to learn and some great stories to share, so let's get stuck into it. My guest is Ben Cohn, CEO of Taxibox, Australia's leading mobile self-storage provider. So Ben, thank you so much for joining us today on the special edition of StoreCast for the Self-Storage Association Asia Expo. It's great for you to take some time out and join us as the leading light in mobile self-storage in the Australian market. You're based there in Melbourne. Melbourne, unfortunately, has had one of the longest COVID lockdown periods globally, which has been a really challenging period of time for the Melbourne residents. Give us an update. How you're going? How's the team going? And how you're finding things as you start to get toward the end of this lockdown?
So, yeah, on the personal front, mentally it's a bit hard for everyone, and so that's not an uncommon thing that's happening for everyone. In terms of the business, from the team's perspective, the working from home scenario, I think, was a bit of a novelty, and everyone's sort of looking forward to coming back into the office. So there's something going on there. Mentally, yes. Culturally, we've done everything we can to try and maintain a positive environment. I think that's working relatively okay, but there's a bit of a challenge there. From the businesses front, it seems to be the sort of theme of COVID in that we haven't been able to predict what would happen during these periods, and the business has actually been faring really well, particularly in Melbourne. So it's kind of a double-edged sword at the moment for us.
Yeah, it's been amazing, hasn't it, just to see what on earth's going on through this crazy time. Ben, just for the benefit of our audience at the Expo, can you tell us a little bit about your business, Taxibox? It's a really well-known brand here in the Australian market, and you guys really have put a lot of energy and effort and have got a really serious amount of momentum in the growth of that sector of the self-storage business. Assuming that people don't know a lot about the differences between mobile self-storage and traditional self-storage, do you want to just talk us through the difference, the characteristics of your sector of the market, and it'd be great to understand how you got into it.
Sure. So the concept of mobile storage is that it's like a traditional storage scenario, but the difference is we're physically delivering the storage unit to the customer's front door. They fill them up, lock them, and then we take them back to warehouses or storage centers, and we stack them up, block stack them. So customers can access the Taxibox just like a normal storage unit. So they just get brought down to like a loading area at the facility, or we actually deliver them back to the customers if they wanted to access the Taxiboxes. So it goes both ways. That's kind of really the fundamental difference. Now, that sort of caters to the vast majority of our business, but we also have small offshoots that are actually really fast growing areas. And one of them is we've got on-site storage, which is metal sort of units that we now have for the construction commercial space, where it gets left on site for a customer. And we've had a real surge of these as part of COVID, as part of PPE and hospitals needing to have sort of centers where you store stuff left at the site, plus the renovation market, construction market. We've also got refrigerated taxi boxes. So we sort of ventured off into refrigerated storage on site, and that's was a good market up until COVID, but it's now coming back pretty strong. And then we have moving interstate. So that's a scenario where you got a box delivered to your door in one city, fill it up, lock it, and then we deliver that same taxi box to the next address. So there's sort of a different streams to the business. And I think you asked me, how do we come up with it? Was that a question as well?
Well, just interested in how you got into the industry and why mobile storage rather than traditional self-storage.
I think how I came into the industry was that I'd originally come from a sort of fairly straightforward path. I was in consulting at a university, and I was actually in the US for work, and I'd seen sort of the concept of mobile storage starting up there. I was actually around New York, and then from there we said, well, how come it's not happening in Australia? And we did a fair bit of research to understand why it wasn't happening in Australia, and there was no real obvious reason. So I think it was just a matter of the timing was right. We had pods just setting up at that stage, and there was sort of other companies looking into it. So there was an opportunity there. And then this idea of mobile storage versus traditional storage, I think it's twofold. One of them is that I was excited by the idea of a new disruptive sort of model that no one was doing and seeing where that would go. And then the other thing is, I guess from a capital perspective, lower barriers to entry from the perspective of not having to buy sites, but there was a capital cost in the physical boxes. And so we were quite careful as to how we manage those costs at the start of the business.
So mobile storage really seems to be embedded in the concept of the customer service and customer experience, right? And customer convenience, so that people have the Taxibox delivered to their door. They can load it, and then it goes away to another location. And perhaps when they arrive at the other destination, the other end of the destination where they're moving house or what have you, or if their renovation's completed, the Taxibox can be ordered to come back. So if it's rooted essentially in that concept of customer convenience and customer experience, let's go back to COVID 2020 and the lessons learnt. So clearly, very disruptive year for customers in their own life, in their own business. What changes in demand or customer experiences have you seen, and any particularly memorable experiences you'd like to share?
Going back to your point, the customer service experience is certainly one that we take pride in, and there's that benefit in that the box or the Taxibox comes out to your front door. From the idea of, we're chatting with the Self-Storage Association, so from the idea of actually running a self-storage business, there's no doubt that a mobile storage business has got materially more moving parts, in that you've got a higher labour component, and we've got logistics that we run internally. But from the utilisation of land, we'd argue that longer term, we're utilising the land in a fairly efficient way, in that there's very little capital works required on these industrial assets to actually house the storage units. And then longer term, like I said, as the prices of property rise in inner city locations, rental increases need to take place, which cover that yield. And for us, we're actually able to, I think, maintain the rental of what we're charging customers by just getting our boxes further out in other areas, or stored in other areas, because the customer doesn't really know where the Taxibox is stored. So it's kind of an interesting discussion.
Yeah, absolutely. So the longer, as mobile storage evolves, look, I get, the property play starts to come into it, I guess, is what you're saying. But I guess it doesn't ultimately have to be rooted in the customer experience. The customer's going to select Taxibox for a reason, and as you highlighted, that customer might be a building company, a health services company, doesn't have to be a residential customer. And so they're ultimately going to want some sort of convenience, and certainly price point, of course. But if you can then evolve your product beyond that, which will ultimately underpin its longevity and turn that into a high utilisation of property, then that certainly is further cream in the cake. I'd acknowledge that.
Correct, and that's one of the strategies for us. Is we just acquired one of our sites with the second one underway, and we're really converting that into actually a freehold model for us. So I think long term is, if we, and I know this is probably unpopular in the storage industry to be saying this, but if we can as a mobile storage operator offer storage at cheaper rates per square meter or cubic meter than a traditional storage center can, plus actually offer the customer experience, that's our win, right? So, and that's where we're really trying to sort of get at eventually.
Yeah, well, look, whether it's unpopular or not, the reality is this industry needs to keep evolving, and this year of 2020 has seen things evolve at light speed. So, the industry needs to embrace mobile storage and all of the complications and implications that has. If it's relevant to customers, and clearly for the success of your business, which I've seen and we've spoken over many months about, customers are embracing it, and so the industry therefore needs to open it, understand it, and embrace it as well.
Yeah. So going to your comment about COVID, which is interesting, and just, do you mind just asking that question again? Was just to understand how the business has gone during COVID, or what are the lessons?
Well, to me, I think the great segue from that is, so if customer experience underpins mobile storage at the get-go, then what reshaping of the customer experience have you seen? What reshaping of demand has been driven by COVID? And I'm really fascinated with your answer to that, Ben, because again, as I said at the outset, you've been based in Melbourne, although your business is certainly across the country here in Australia. Melbourne has been such an interesting microcosm of COVID. There was a shutdown, there was an opening, and then there was a very rapid and very severe shutdown, which I believe has probably been the longest globally to date.
I can only shake my head and say that I kind of, as much as I try and control the business, I feel like I have material influence over things like this, like COVID happened, and then you try and respond to it, and then everything you try to respond with is very different to what you thought would actually happen. So that's certainly been the case for us. So on the one hand, when COVID hit, we thought that our debtors were going to skyrocket, and then with all the government pumping money into the economy, our debtors are the lowest they've ever been. So that's one thing that was very different. And that might be to do with our demographic, and that we've got sort of a younger demographic that was receiving the JobKeeper support. So that was one thing. And then, it opened up a whole bunch of new reasons for storage that we hadn't seen to date. And so you had all these people, leaving the cities and going to live in regional areas and storing their stuff temporarily. Then I think longer term, we've got this economic shift, or this sort of macroeconomic shift of people that have just been sitting at home consuming throughout this period because they've had nothing else to do. And so they're going to be left with a lot of stuff that they're ultimately going to need to store. So longer term, I think it's good for the industry as a whole. Big surgence in customers that are using us for on-site storage, particularly in the case of Melbourne, and I'll come to Melbourne in a second because it's been kind of the remarkable story of the business for the last sort of few months. But a lot of new reasons for storage that we hadn't seen. So like I said, hospitals, various businesses that are using us for on-site storage at the moment, where they wouldn't have done otherwise, and so there's lots of restaurants and cafes that are using us, people that are leaving offices in the city. It's been amazing to see this growth in sort of people that are vacating offices and using taxi boxes. And yeah, as much as I'm actually talking through this, I should say, and this relates to this comment of not having control of the business, I'm not exactly sure what's going on, but I do know that Melbourne's been at the moment really firing on all cylinders. Our redeliveries have dropped off, and so that means our net growth in units has actually been quite high. So for us, it's boxes coming in, boxes leaving, and that's our net growth, obviously. So we've had this dynamic where we've had an increased demand and a reduced number of redeliveries. So our net growth's been really good. And other shifts have been, people moving into state, using us for lockdown support. This has been amazing. So what happens is we offer a free month of storage. So what's going on is that people when you move into state, you get your free month of storage. So you pay for your interstate fee. And in Australia, you have to quarantine between cities, right? So what happens is people are vacating their home, going to Sydney, quarantining for 14 days, and getting their storage effectively done for free for that month. So they get all their stuff loaded up in the one city. They go and they spend 2 weeks in the hotel quarantine. They're not paying for the storage during that period, and then we deliver the storage to them at the end. So that's another reason. Don't know what's going on.
It's been remarkable, the changes that have come through, and you talk about interstate migration. Well, Australia's on the move, right? And every time there's been a pandemic or a major event like a world war, it's always triggered significant migration, whether that's within or outside of borders. And at the moment, it's inside of the national borders. And the interstate migration is going to be really significant from all indicators, which would be great for mobile storage, I'd assume.
I should probably say, if it's of help for yourselves, hence being Brisbane headquartered, it's all heading up north. It used to be Sydney to Brisbane, and now it's Melbourne to Brisbane by the hordes. It's just amazing.
Mate, they are coming up, as you say, by the dozens, and I don't think it's going to change. And this concept of work from anywhere is really on as well. And then now you've got Brisbane people going further north to the Sunshine Coast and other places. Maybe they're getting away from the Victorians, I don't know. But everyone's heading north, and that change is on, and I can't see that stopping for some time, which is fascinating.
So I was going to say one last thing before you move on to the next question, Hans, which I thought was worth adding as well. On the topic of COVID and mobile storage, seems to have been this shift online that we all talk about, this delivery economy, right? So everyone's ordering their Uber Eats and everyone's getting parcels delivered to their home. And we do wonder whether we've been sort of picked up in this world of delivery of storage, and that this expectation that longer term people are looking for that to take place as well. And in the case of Melbourne, you've had this lockdown scenario where people haven't wanted to leave their house. And so I wonder whether they're just not able to go to storage centres, or they haven't wanted to go to storage centres and they're getting the storage unit delivered and it's like a contactless experience. They don't see anyone, the box gets delivered and it's gone. So could be something there as well. I don't know.
Well, definitely. And I was going to say, you must have been a beneficiary of that 5K lockdown radius, which has been in place for a long period of time in Melbourne. People, or even when it was shorter than 5 kilometres, and people just can't travel to a self-storage centre or to a restaurant, etc. So they've started to get the deliveries, and one would say that if that's been in place for long enough, then you're going to be the beneficiary of that perhaps being a change of behaviour, which would be fascinating to watch and check in and see how that's going in the coming months. So 2020, transformational, no doubt at all. What's next, Ben, for the self-storage industry? Key themes that you're seeing, innovations, overall market growth. Look, it's so hard to predict, but how do you see 2021 and beyond?
Key themes, market growth. Like I just said before, I see the delivery model increasing over time. Again, I don't know where storage is headed, and we haven't been around for that long in the industry. It's been 10 years now, but there's people out there that have been around for much longer. I'm of the view that the delivery model, the demand for delivery services will continue to increase over time generally. In terms of the general themes, in storage, I probably can't comment on the self-storage industry other than there's going to be continued pressure on pricing as land rates increase and there's more competition from other storage players around, and everyone's sort of squeezing their margins. So I think that there's probably some pressure on pricing that'll take place. I imagine that's the case, at least in Australia, in the inner cities. And it's very hard to find the opportunities for the right sites. Again, we see that as an opportunity for us in the mobile storage space. There's obviously a lot of technology that's going into the industry. I think from our perspective, and the impact of technology in traditional storage is different than for us. For us, it's very much about automating our logistics of our business, and we've done an amazing job at that. I think we've got sort of an in-house team that have built that. There's automation around the Bluetooth locks. I know that's been around for a while, but we're starting to explore that, and I'm sure that'll go in the storage industry as time goes on. So unmanned facilities. We're actually experimenting with some local, so I won't use the word local, micro storage sites that are going to be unmanned sites with some Bluetooth locks. We're going to try that. So yeah, I think from the general industry, that seems to be the theme. And for us, it's really doubling down on what we're currently doing. I think there's some really exciting opportunities in our construction space, the metal units. Our refrigerated storage is coming along all right, and still the growth in the core business that we continue to push.
Good stuff. One of the things I love about the way you run your business, Ben, is you're always trying new things, fearless, and roll the dice and see how it comes up. And it sounds like a number of them have really worked well for you over the last year. So well done.
Yeah.
And Ben, tell us a bit about the man behind the brand. What keeps you busy? I know you've got a young family. What do you do when you're not doing mobile self-storage?
Yeah, I think it's, if it wasn't lockdowns, I'd be spending the majority of my time trying to play a bit of squash. I play a fair bit of squash, but at the moment can't do that. So that's kind of probably my biggest issue as part of lockdowns. And then, family and kids. And if I think about that question, running a business, one of the downsides to running your business is that your hobbies seem to dwindle away year by year. And so having a 20-month-old with a very excited, 20-month-old son with a very excited Staffordshire Bull Terrier puppy, and then my wife, I don't really get much time to do anything else, sadly. So that's my life for now. Right.
Okay. Well, that sounds pretty hectic, and no doubt you've got to appreciate the city, or you'll come to appreciate the city once you open up and embrace Melbourne in summer over the coming months, which will be wonderful. And And today's pretty topical because I think there is potentially some news from the Premier of Victoria of easing restrictions either today, tomorrow, and on behalf of the industry, well done on getting through 2020 down there. It's I know we've had a lot of chats during that period of time, and there's been some pretty relaxed moments and some pretty tense moments I've seen in the way that you've been able to handle it. But well done, and a real congratulations on the growth of Taxibox. You guys do some wonderful marketing. It's a real feature, I think, of your business. I love the way you present your product, and no doubt it's evolving. And it's an interesting comment. The macro trends of the delivery economy might play directly into your hands, which would be great to watch. And so thank you very much for joining us. Thanks for everything you do in the industry, and thanks for sharing your thoughts and your experiences of 2020 today, Ben. Much appreciated.
Thanks, Hans. Thank you, guys.
Some great takeaways from that interview. We'll see you soon on this special Expo edition of StoreCast.